Welcome to Scars to Stars, where conversations and personal stories let us know we are not alone. In this show, you will meet authors and speakers from our books and events as they share vulnerable personal stories to spread hope and inspire you through adversities in your own life. The world is a difficult place. You will find like-minded people here with kind hearts and supportive souls. I am your host, Dina Brown Mitchell. I am a suicide survivor and the founder of the Realize Foundation. I am so glad you are here. Let's dig into this meaningful conversation. Hi, everybody. It's Dina at the Realize Foundation, and I have another special guest for you today. Her name is Peggy Christian, and we're going to have her tell you a little bit about herself. Welcome, Peggy.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. And so I'm Dr. Peggy Christian. My current position is that I am a empowerment coach and I run women's circles as well as a speaker, and I also have workshops and things like that. But I have a long story before that. So as a kid, I decided I wanted to be a dentist. I loved science, and I inherently knew that I didn't want to be a doctor. And this will come into the story a little bit later. I didn't want the responsibility of taking care of patients that may have been, very, very ill. So for me, I went and I became a dentist. And then I didn't stay as a dentist for very long. I just worked for about 8 years in full-time clinical work. And then I transitioned into doing clinical research. And what that did for me is it allowed me to use the science that I loved and in ways that were still helping people, because I worked for companies that were developing drugs and then eventually devices, because that's mostly what's used in dentistry. And I did that for close to 20 years, lots of different roles in that. And as I was growing in myself and becoming more the person that I am today, I decided to go into coaching, because I realized my entire life I had really been coaching people. When I was a dentist, I was coaching them to be the best stewards of their own bodies and teeth and mouths. And then when I was in the clinical research part, I was managing projects and having everyone understand how they fit into the cog. And I love what I'm doing now. So my story really started when I was pretty young. I come from a large family, and our large family had a lot going on, and I was the sixth kid in about 5.5 years. So my parents were really busy, really overwhelmed. And I kind of early on decided that I needed to kind of take care of myself. Some of my brothers had some learning disabilities, and I could read, so everything was going really, really well for me. And so I became kind of independent and not wanting to be a burden for my family. The other thing that I realized early on is that I would call it now that I was an empath. So I could pick up the emotional things that were happening in a room, and I inherently knew what other people needed. And so I wanted, as a child, and this is what I still do, I wanted people to feel safe, and I wanted to be able to help people along the way. But as time went on, certain things happened to me. And when I had really a pretty significant event happen when I was 10, and then shortly after that, we moved to a new location. We had been living in a lower socioeconomic group where it was very diverse in the suburbs of Chicago, and we moved to a higher, actually like upper middle class suburb where there wasn't much diversity at all. And I really went into culture shock. I was in 5th grade and I didn't dress the way that people expected. I didn't know the social norms. And so I started to get picked on, and I didn't know what to do about that. And being an empath and being a person who didn't want to be a burden, like I didn't bring any of that home. I just thought I could figure it out on my own. And so luckily for me, the next year we moved to a new school. And by that time I had learned a little bit of how to fit in. And so that part of my life, that early preteen right up into the, getting into teenage, was really pretty significant for me. I started to feel that I didn't belong anywhere, and that there was something about me that made people pick on me. There was something about me that I had to keep secret from others. And I brought that all the way through my life until into my 30s. And so what that did is it caused me, as things happened and I didn't know how to work with it, it caused me to go into depression. And again, I didn't know at that point who I could trust, and it was hard for me. And I just kept going towards my goal. So my goal as a young girl, maybe when I was 11 or so, I decided that I wanted to be the dentist. And so it was such a nice path that was there. And at the same time, I was struggling, with feeling like I belonged anywhere. And so for me, I started around 10 or 11 having these ideas where I just didn't want to be anywhere. And it would wax and wane, but it just was kind of always in the background. And as time went on, I started finding drugs and alcohol as a young teenager. And that kind of helped me in some ways to turn off the voice and to numb myself. And eventually I started using alcohol all the time, even when I went to college and then throughout dental school, I kept telling myself that once I became a dentist, I would be happy. I would have the things I want. I would have the security. I'd have the safety. I'd have this place of honor. I'd be able to be helping people in the way that I always wanted to, the way that I had been doing my entire life. And so, but the thing is I didn't stop drinking. And luckily, about a year after being practicing as a dentist, I finally reached out. There was a group through the Dental Association, and I reached out through them. And I then started on the journey of becoming sober. But the most important thing that allowed me is I got to know myself. All that numbing for all those years had allowed me to, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know my values. I didn't know anything because I had spent so much time having an idea about myself that I was bad, that there was no reason for me to be here. And yet at the same time, I had this life force that was allowing me to become these people and to be successful. But I wasn't fully there. I always felt alone in a room. And then once I started clearing my brain from all the drinking and I started looking at myself, I still at times had that feeling where I just didn't want to be here. I didn't want to do anything that would harm somebody else. And I really was such a people pleaser that I didn't want anyone to be harmed if I had done something to myself. And because I was able to get rid of the numbing, I was able to finally get to know myself, get some help through community. I belong to AA, and that really, really helped me. and had a program, and then did some individual counseling. And because of that, then that and I started to love being with myself. And I started to find the ideas that I had developed as a young child, didn't have the capacity to know that I had made conclusions about who I was and what was available to me when I was very young and didn't have all the capacities that I had as an adult. And then when I realized that, then I knew I could have new conclusions about who I was. And now I help other people do that. That's one of the greatest things that I have, whether it's in the women's circles where it's more casual, or when I'm actually working directly one-on-one with somebody that's coaching. So
thank you for sharing all of that. I think there's so many things I want to ask you, but the first thing that comes to mind is how did you figure out you were an empath?
That's actually okay. So I'm 65.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't realize that until just recently, probably in the last 5 years. And like, it's not so much that I carry other people's things. Like sometimes an empath may really like take on other people's emotions and things like that. And so I always didn't think I was that way. I would say, well, I'm empathetic. I'm not really an empath. I don't know if that makes any difference at all. But the truth is I didn't have the burden of other people's things, but I could read a room and I could know exactly what somebody needed to hear so that they could transform where they were seeing something from a way that wasn't helpful. And oftentimes, I actually younger, I used to call it, I would call them God instances, where it would feel like I would get an idea, it would come into my brain and out my mouth. It's like I knew that in some way I didn't generate that thought myself. And often it had profound effect on the person that I was talking to. And I loved being able to have that capacity to see how somebody else could change there. And isn't it funny, because I couldn't do that for myself for all those years.
Well, I'm curious because I have a similar story, and I think I was older when I realized it too. And for me, it's just like I feel people's sadness and pain. Like I don't know how to explain it either, but when I'm around someone, I can just really tell how they're feeling. I don't know why, or always what to do about it, but it is this thing that it's a gift for us to be able to discern that, but then sometimes you don't know what to do with it.
Right. And it's so interesting because I think that the other thing that comes with it is, for me, being able to know what other people are feeling. Sometimes it's hard to be in the outside world.
Mm.
I remember being 11 and there was the trouble in the Middle East, and I lived in Chicago, and we had these, I lived near Chicago, but there was all this terrible stuff because they had these housing projects that were just blocks and blocks and miles of just, and the kids that were my age, I would hear stories, they would just be sitting in their apartment and a stray bullet would kill them. And I would be deeply moved and troubled by that.
Mm-hmm.
As a young person, thinking there's no cause and effect here.
Yeah.
They're good kids trying to do their thing, and just their circumstances made it. And and so it's so interesting to be able to feel deeply, and in a lot of ways, as long as you have a place, a safe place, I think, and this is maybe why as we become adults, we can look at it more objectively. We have people that we can talk to about that, and to be able to support us, supporting others, because you can't do it in a vacuum, you know?
Hi there, it's Dina. If you like our podcast and you're enjoying learning about other people's stories of overcoming adversity, please go over to therealizefoundation.org and support us by donating. We believe that conversations, community, and personal story can change lives and reduce suicide ideation. And we also have a way, if you have a business, you can support us without money out of your pocket. So go on over to realizefoundation.org and look at the donate page, and you can learn how to support us as a business, and also you can donate any amount. Thank you so much.
So can you talk a little bit about maybe when you realized that you had an alcohol problem, and then how you got involved in AA?
Yeah, like in some ways for a long time, I thought once I became a dentist, then I wouldn't want to drink.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, before I went to dental school, my dad had said to me, you need to do something about your drinking. And there was also in my family, a couple other siblings were having trouble with that type of stuff too. And so I could focus on them, and they needed help, because here I am, I'm a student. I'm not dropping out of high school. I'm not getting into trouble. They should just follow my example. And so, people would call it functioning alcoholism. And most of the people that knew me would never have even, like, I was in college, kids in college drink. And I don't think that anyone would have called me an alcoholic, but I was. And inside, I knew that I was, right. And so, but I thought that I would have the key would just be, once I reached my goals, then I wouldn't want it. And then later, so through this organization, through the Dental Society, they brought me to my first AA meetings, and then supported me in a lot of other ways. And what I learned in AA is so often people have all these kind of solutions, just like I was going to have the solution of when I became a dentist, suddenly I wouldn't have any troubles, right? But they say, there's people who they move because that's going to get a new solution, or they get in a new relationship because that's going to take care of it. And actually what you learn is you have to get to know yourself. And what's so great about what I do as a coach, modern personal coaching is actually based on the principles of AA, which I break down into, you get to know yourself, something that's outside of yourself, something greater than yourself. Some people call it God, some people call it universe, some people call it whatever they want. And then you have a community. And it's with those three components that, in general, a person can thrive. Whether they have something that they need to manage, which might be, a substance problem or anger problem, or they don't even have to have a problem. Those are the aspects that keep humans in a place where they have happiness and peace and the ability to be their best self.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny, when I was in high school, a really good friend of mine, and my family and their family were very good friends, but the mom of the other family was going to get her 1-year chip at the AA meeting. And I don't remember how this happened or why, but I went with her. And I might have been like a senior, I might have been in college, I can't remember, but I went with her, maybe because her son couldn't go and he was my friend or something. And I remember that experience, and it was the first time I'd ever been to something like that. And it was just, it opened my eyes to so many things. And later, after that, I had my own alcohol problem. I never went to AA, but I probably should have. But it's you know, it's these communities and conversations that help all of us with whatever it is for us. I mean, maybe for us it was alcohol, maybe it was something else for other people. But if we don't have some kind of community or a way to talk about it, it's really hard to get through it.
Absolutely. One of the things when I first went to AA that, like, my thoughts would just, I would call it like pinball in my brain, right? And it'd go from here to there and there. And what I was able to achieve at the AA meetings was other people, I could relate to what other people said. And that allowed my thoughts to slow down. And that was a big part of the healing, is knowing, number one, that I'm not alone. Number two, that other people have the same feelings and thoughts and issues. And that was something that I had hidden and lived like this double life of not sharing myself and never feeling connected to another person. People felt connected to me, but I didn't feel connected to them. And that made me feel alone. And for me, early on in the AA journey, and you could get this from a therapist, you could get this from a friend that maybe has gone through something else very similarly, but to have somebody else be able to deeply understand and to name the things that up to that point are not named, you're not able to name because there's so much inner turmoil. And I think that is so important, so important.
I agree with you. I think the last question I have for you is around, you mentioned when you were younger that there was a time that you didn't want to be around. Were you talking about ideation?
Yeah, so absolutely. And it was from I was 11 or so until in my 30s. It was a long, long time. And so for me, it was a background chronic thing where it was like a wish to not be there. Sometimes it would just come out of the blue. I'd walk past a window and I would think, oh, maybe you should jump out, even if it was like not very high. But it was, and that part, I felt like I had to keep that really secret too. But after I was sober for a while, then I started to address that. And I have to say that probably for the last 15 years, that has not been an issue. But yeah, it was always in the background. And then I had a brother actually commit suicide at the age of 26, his age of 26. Yeah. So it, it's, and I have such an interesting relationship with it. But on one hand, it was this double kind of life of building a future and at the same time not wanting to have a future.
Yeah, I understand. I'm wondering if when you had ideation, did you want to be alone, or did you try to be around other people to have community? Like what place did that put you in a matter of like for me, I just want to be alone when I feel like that. But other people intentionally put themselves in situations where they're having conversations or they're around other people. How do you feel
Yeah.
about that?
I don't know if there was a pattern. I don't know, but I do know that I got to a certain point where I was so sick and tired of my life and how I was being, that I kind of knew that I had to live by myself. And so I moved out of living with my boyfriend and I moved by myself because I think I knew that I needed to not have anybody to blame for anything, and so for me, I kind of knew it was a singular journey to begin with to make the decision. And then once I made the decision to get help, then I did really relish the community that I could be around.
Yeah, that just makes me think of one more question, because I think when you have the empath situation, it's like you're stimulated so much by so many things. And I believe that that's what makes me want to be alone a lot, because when you're around a lot of people, it's like you're taking on all of their emotions. But when you're by yourself, you don't have to figure out what to do with that. And so maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, for me, like I said, I don't take on the other people's emotions. I just am able to recognize them.
Mhm.
And so I actually would rather be in a crowd. I don't necessarily feel like I need the downtime ever.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why it's been a long time that I even consider, I always said, no, I'm not an empath because I don't take on anybody. So maybe whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
Empath
Well, I
light.
just think it's interesting to hear the nuances about stuff like that, because I think it's a big deal for the people who really do take on other people's
Right.
emotions. It can really change their state,
Right.
in a good way or a bad way. So
Yeah. Yeah. I really feel blessed that that doesn't happen to me. I actually get really energized when I'm with people.
that's great.
Yeah.
I feel that sometimes too. It just depends, I guess. But Peggy, thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself and having this conversation with me today. I think it will be helpful to others.
Thank you. It's really great to be able to have this platform, and with the Realize Foundation, it's really important to me what you guys do. And I have worked, I've volunteered with youth most of my adult life because I really want to help other people not have to go through what I did, and to know that they matter, and to be able, so it's been very important to me to give back. Yeah.
We have the same mission in that regard, for sure. But again, thank you for sharing and telling your story, because sometimes that's not easy.
Thank you. And I'm so happy that you invited me to be on the podcast. I'm really excited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. So I can end it before I started coughing. And then I can ask you the other two questions so we can
Okay.
have those for the book launch. So the first question is about your story, and it's how would you explain what you wrote about in book 5?
Yeah, so in book 5, my title of my chapter is called I Looked Fine, But I Wasn't. And my story really is about how I purposely was going through life.
You know what? I need to stop you for a second because I forgot to take myself out of the feed for your answer. So let me remove myself and then you can start over. I'm sorry about that.
Don't worry about it.
And just take your time whenever you want to start.
Okay. Hi. My chapter in book 5 is called I Looked Fine on the Outside, But I Wasn't. And so my story really talks about how you can have like this parallel life that's going on. And in my case, I was leading a life looking like I was successful, meeting these goals that I wanted. And on the inside, I was not okay. I had very low self-worth, and it was like I had parallel lives. And so I projected myself one way in public, and then privately, it was totally a disconnect. Totally, none of my friends knew that I had that disconnect. No, none of because I kept it so inside. I kept it so hidden. But it was at a cost. It was at a cost of me being able to feel aligned and connected with others. And it's so important for me to feel the connection, and I craved the connection. But I was the one that was blocking it. And that's kind of what the story is about. And I'm really happy that if they can relate to maybe that's what they're doing, and they can see that they're with the right circumstances, you can have a fully loving and happy and joyful life, because I was able to do that.
I'm so happy you joined us for this conversation. My wish is that you found comfort and hope in your own unique situation. If you resonated with our message, please head over to therealizefoundation.org, where you can apply to write your own story in one of our books. You can also download our 60 Ideas for Self-Care on the resources page. I can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, you are not alone, you are worthy, and you are enough.